I teach meditation and Buddhism for a lot of kids. Sometimes they say, "Oh, meditation, it's boring," isn't it? Is meditation boring? No? Yes. It is boring. But boring is peace. Boring is peace. What do you do? What are you doing usually to be in peace? What do you want to do? You let go of all the distractions. You keep your mobile phone away. You keep other things away. You just be somewhere else. That is to feel the peace. So yes, meditation is boring. But what is boring is peace. Okay. Sometimes I get this, they say, "Oh, being a monk is so boring." Why? There is nothing to do. No, there is a thing to do. There is a purpose. But boring. Yes. Why? Because boring is peace. Okay? Don't underestimate the boring. Peace. We find peace in boring. Once you become distracted, what happens to you? Huh? Once the life become not boring, you become distracted. Peace is always boring. I know, meditation is boring, but it's peaceful. We have to seek it. And once you seek it, you find that you can enjoy this. And then meditation becomes, boring becomes enjoyable. Calmness becomes enjoyable. Understand that? So that path, that is the first step of meditation. But it does not stop from that, just being peaceful. The Buddha teaches us that why you should be peaceful, because without being peaceful, we cannot understand the truth. Once you become distracted, it's difficult to understand the truth of life. Once you become distracted, you don't have the ability, you will lose the ability to find the true nature of life. What is the true nature of life?
Namo Buddhaya. A couple of days ago, when I was reading the Dhammapada, I came across this wonderful verse from the Buddha. This is from Dhammapada, verse number 290. The Buddha says, "If by renouncing a lesser happiness, one may realize a greater happiness, let the wise man renounce the lesser, having regard for the greater." Now this simply says, if you seek a greater happiness in your life, you need to be brave enough to let go of the lesser or the cheaper happinesses in life. Now this made me thinking this can be applied to any area of our life. Whether you are a student who is studying to achieve a greater happiness or a greater achievement in your education life, there are certain things that keeps you away from that achieving it. Sometimes those things can be some pleasurable things, like watching movies, like scrolling on social media. But when it comes to it, like superficially, when we look at it, in the beginning, it's very enjoyable. It has its own entertainment. But the problem is it takes the valuable time from us. It steals the valuable time from us so that we waste time for a cheaper happiness. And what we miss is a greater happiness in the future that is yet to come. So the Buddha says, if you seek a greater happiness in life, you need to be brave enough to let go of the cheaper happinesses that keeps you away from achieving that greater happiness. Now, this is applicable for the monk's life as well. This is why we become monks, right? As monks, we show that we need to seek a greater happiness in life, because as humans, what we seek in life is always happiness. But for a monk, he thinks that I need to achieve something greater than the normal happiness, right? A peace that is beyond from the normal peace in the world that we talk about. But to do that, we realize that it is not possible, or it is really, really difficult to be with the other cheaper happinesses in life, so that we need to let go of them to seek something greater. And that is what even the Buddha did, right? So many people complain that why Gautama, the Siddhartha Gautama, let go of the lay life or the material life. Why did he ran away from the life so that he become a monk? It's not about that he ran away from the responsibilities. It's about he understood that one cannot achieve the greater liberation in life or the greater peace in life, which is nirvana, by staying in this household life. So that he let go of that household life and became a monk. And he started to seek the spiritual path. And he found the nirvana and he found the liberation. And also, he didn't stop from that. He came back to the palace and he helped everyone who was in the palace in his life to achieve the same state of peace. So that if one seeks a greater happiness in life, right, we need to be brave enough to let go of that cheaper happinesses that we are being busy and that steals our time in our life, right? Sometimes it can be a toxic habit that you have, right? For an example, in a toxic habit, it is really, really easy and it is really, really enjoyable in the beginning, but it makes your life so much difficult after. And that is why they say that if you do what is easy today, your life will be difficult tomorrow. And if you do what is difficult today, your life will be easy tomorrow. And that is how the world works, right? For a toxic habit, it is very easy to do, but it makes our life so much difficult. But for a good habit, it is really, really difficult to practice, and it is really, really difficult to make it a habit, but it makes our life so much easier after. Okay, it can be applied to any area of your life. Like, let's talk about the spiritual life. Okay, usually when we become monks, it was really difficult to be disciplined, right? Once you become a monk, first of all, you become a novice monk, and you have 10 disciplines to practice. Right? And after staying as a novice monk, you become a higher ordained monk. And then suddenly your precepts and your disciplines reach up to 227 disciplines. And it was really, really difficult to be disciplined. But once you learn, once you practice, once you dedicate your time and energy to be disciplined, it makes your life so much easier. And after some time, you realize that all these disciplines are made for your life to make it easier and make it so much free and make your life so much independent. Okay, so that is why we should believe that we should attain the freedom through discipline, right? Through hard work. So now take a look at your life. What are the things that keeps you away from achieving the greater achievements in your life or greater happinesses in your life? And be brave enough to say no to them, right? When you say no to them, it buys you so much more time that you can focus on what really, really matters. So keep this little advice in your mind, and let's meet with another video. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. We all know that forgiving is difficult, right? It is easier said than done. Now, even in forgiving, it is very easy to forgive for the mistakes that other people have done to us. But it is really, really difficult to forgive for our own mistakes, for the mistakes that we have done in the past, right? And so many people, most of us worry about the things that has happened in the past, about the things that we said in the past, about how we act in the past, how we lived in the past. And we get stuck in these mistakes and we waste a lot of time, right? But the Buddha teaches us a way to look at these mistakes and how to move on and how to move through them and how to grow through them. So from this video, we are going to discuss about how can we deal with the mistakes that we have done in the past and how can we correct them and how can we deal with them. So I want to share with you how the Buddha advised for the monks who have done mistakes and how they got the advice to deal with it. So the Buddha says, Buddhissa bhikkhu ariyassa vinaye yo achayang achayato disva yatha dhammang patikaroti ayathing sangwarang apajati. The Buddha says, for it is growth in the training of nobles to recognize a mistake for what it is, deal with it properly, and commit to restrain in the future. So the Buddha says the first step of understanding and first step of dealing with a mistake that has done in the past is to accept it, to see the mistake as it is, to see the wrong thing as a wrong thing. This is called acceptance. Now, one of the most difficult things for us to do is to accept that we have done mistakes. Why? Because there is something that hurt us in our mind, right? It is a really big problem, and that is nothing but the ego. We always think, okay, we are right, we are correct, and I will never do mistakes. But the reality is, we all are humans, we all have imperfections, we all have defilements in our minds, so that we make mistakes, right? There's a saying that says, as long as you make mistakes, you are human. So understand, you're a human and you make mistakes, and the nature of your mind is to make wrong choices, wrong things, and do the mistakes. For that, you're okay with it, right? So that you understand the nature of your life, that I'm a human and I make mistakes, so you accept it. When you accept it, you don't hate yourself. Now, the problem is not the mistake. The problem is worrying about it, brooding over it, holding on to it, and wishing that, I wish I couldn't do that. I wish I didn't say that. No, I wish I didn't act like that. So that we waste a long, long time, right? A valuable time that we can use to create something better for our life. So that the Buddha says, accept the mistake, right? Accept that you have done the mistake. Remember, acceptance is the first step of healing, right? Acceptance is the first step of healing, so that you don't hate yourself, so that you are not in war with yourself. Now you open up your mind to move on. So the Buddha says, see the wrong thing as a wrong thing, right? See the mistake as a mistake and accept that you have done it. So the first step of dealing with a past mistake or wrong thing that you have done in the past is to accept it. So after accepting, now what to do? The Buddha says, now reveal it to someone who can understand you, right? Confess it. How to do that? You find someone who can understand you, right? Who can give you a good advice and who doesn't judge you, and say to him that I did this mistake, right? This mistake was happened from me. Now, why should you confess it? Now, when you confess it, you're sharing what is inside you with someone who can understand you. Okay, there are many good things when you confess. One thing is that your mind becomes free, right? Because after doing a mistake, if a mistake had happened, one thing that keep criticizing us is our mind, ourself, right? So that understand, when you confess, you can free your mind, right? Your heart is not complaining you, so that you opened up yourself, right? That is one good thing that happens when you confess. And also, you get good advice from them, how to deal with it. Sometimes, for some problems, we cannot deal with alone, right? You don't have to deal with each and every problem alone, right? You can ask for help. One thing that it is really, really, really difficult to do is to ask for helps, right? But if we ask it, the helps will be given from the right people, right? That is why the Buddha says, do not go around saying your mistakes to everyone, but find at least one person, right? We all can find at least one person who can understand us, who doesn't judge us from our mistakes, and also who can give us good advice. Okay, that is the good thing about having noble friends around you. Okay, so the Buddha says, confess it, open up yourself to someone who is very wise and who can give you advice. And then the Buddha says, the next step is to take right actions to not to happen it again, not to make that mistake again and again. So the Buddha says, yatha dhammang patikaroti, I think sangvarang apajati, to be restrained in the future, to not to do that mistake and not to make that mistake happen again and again. And that is why they say that 100 times the same mistake is regression, right? If you do the same mistake 100 times, then there is no development, right? But 100 times different mistakes is progression, right? We will do thousands and thousands of mistakes in this life, but from every mistake, if we take the decision to not to happen it again, right? And you learn from it. And you will make mistakes again and again, but you learn from them. Understand that every difficult situation, every mistake that you make in life is a great lesson. But the problem is, we think that we should not be making mistakes, we should not be doing wrong things, and we think that we will be perfect forever. But in reality, we are not. So that acceptance, confession, and taking right action to not to it happen again is the way to deal with the mistakes. Understand, as long as you are human, I will say this again, as long as you are human, you will make mistakes. Accept them, confess them, and then take right action to not to it to happen again, so that you can learn from your mistakes and you can grow through them. Keep this in your mind. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Welcome to another video. From today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you one of the most beautiful poems from the Buddha. Now, when it comes to poems, the Buddha had a great talent of uttering poems or uttering verses. We call them gathas in Buddhist texts. So there's a whole array of books that are dedicated only for the verses or the poems that was uttered by the Buddha. For an example, the Dhammapada only contains the verses that was uttered by the Buddha. Sutta Nipata, there's another book called Sutta Nipata, which contains only the verses. So when it comes to uttering poems, the Buddha had a great talent, and these poems are very rich with the direct teachings from the Buddha and very deep meanings about the life. So here's one poem from the Buddha that can inspire you and also that can give you a lot of teachings about the life. The Buddha says, "Let not a person revive the past or on the future build his hopes, for the past has been left behind and the future has not been reached. Instead, with insight, let him see each presently arisen state." Now, this explains about the mindfulness. This is the whole point of practicing the Buddhist way of mindfulness. Now, when it comes to mindfulness, the word that is given in Pali language for mindfulness is sati. Sati is not always a Buddhist word, or mindfulness is not always a Buddhist word, Because before the Buddha also, there were people who practiced sati, but that sati serves a different purpose. Now, if you ask from a normal person who practices the mindfulness or who practices the mindfulness meditations, why do you practice mindfulness? You can answer like, okay, mindfulness helps me to relieve from the stress, right? It makes the things easier. And also it helps me to watch my anger and to control it. Now, it is true that all these purposes are served by the mindfulness, right? All these things are served by the mindfulness to control your anger, to control your emotions, to be more mindful, and also to relieve the stress from your life. It serves that purpose. But in Buddhist practice, the mindfulness serves a purpose that is beyond from these purposes. Okay, the Buddha says, instead, with insight, let him see each presently arising state. Now, this is the whole point of practicing the Buddhist way of mindfulness, which we call sammasati. It is to see the change. It is to see the impermanence nature of life. In the first, the Buddha says, let not a person revive the past. That means, if you understand what is past, the past is gone. It is over now, right? So the Buddha says, do not run back into the past or on the future build his hopes, right? Do not build hopes for the future. Why? The Buddha says, for the past has been left behind. Now, what is past is over now. It doesn't exist, right? And the future has not been reached. Still, the future hasn't reached. So instead, what we have to do is, with insight, let him see each presently arising state. What we have to do is to contemplate, to focus our mind, to focus our awareness on this present state of mind. We only live in this present moment, right? We don't live in past. We don't live in future. We can't live in past or we can't live in future. We only have the only moment that we own in this life is this moment that is fleeting. So what Buddha says is to be more mindful about the experiences that happens in this present moment. Because if you think about the past, it is just an illusion of your mind, right? For an example, we can think about the experiences that happened in the past. We can regenerate that experience in our mind. But that experience is something that happens when we think about the past. That experience is something that happens in right now, but it is disguised as past. We think it is past. Who thinks it is past? We think it, right? But that very thought happens in this very moment. Okay, so how to practice the mindfulness is to be less judgmental or to be no judgment, to have no judgment about the experiences that happens in this present moment, and also to be more aware of it, right? Mindfulness is non-judgmental awareness. For an example, someone can think, okay, when you become mindful, you only keep your mind in the good place, in a good state. No, the Buddha says, saragang va chittang, saragang chittang ti bhajanati. That means when one has a lustful mind, he understands that lustful mind as it is, right? That means when he has anger in his mind, he understands the state of mind, that thought, as anger. Now, the problem is we become so much judgmental about the experiences that we have. Either we try to react positively, either we try to respond positively or to react negatively, right? For an example, let's say we have an uncomfortable thought in our mind. For an example, like anger. What we do is we try to reject that thought, right? We try to reject and we try to push that thought out of our mind. The more we push, the more we create the anger. Okay, so in mindfulness, what we do is we don't judge, we don't label that thought. We just see it as it is. Now, when you do that, you start to not to react to that very thought. And once you start to not to react, once you stop your reactions, what happens? The angry thought is no longer an angry thought, because an angry thought becomes an angry thought when we start to react to it, right? It's something like this. Like you're seeing a traffic pass by, right? You're sitting beside the road and you're seeing a traffic pass by. You don't jump into the middle of the road and you don't try to stop the vehicles, or you don't try to chase behind the vehicles. What you do is you sit beside the road and you look at the vehicles and understand it as it is, right? So that you don't involve in them. You don't become judgmental about them, okay? And that is the practice of mindfulness. Whatever comes to your mind, you're mindful of it. The problem is why we become angry, why we become jealous, and why all these evil thoughts come to our mind is we are not mindful of it. Once you learn how to be mindful, you start to be less judgmental and less reactive to those thoughts, right? And also, you start to think before you act, right? Your mind becomes slower and slower so that you can catch the very thought when it arises. And that is the pinnacle of practicing the mindfulness. And also then you understand that every thought has its own arising and it passes away, right? So every experience that we have has the nature of arising and passing away. Once you realize this nature, the arising nature and the passing away nature, that is what we call the impermanence. And that is called the true nature of life. In Pali, we call it anicca, the change. Now, the Buddha says, once you realize something is subjected to change, and once you realize that everything is subjected to change, everything is anicca, the next realization is if something is subjected to change, it is suffering, right? It is related to suffering. For an example, every suffering in our life, right? Every painful situation, every suffering that we have in our life is due to change, right? We think that we wish the things are not to change, but they change. We wish that certain experiences to not to change, but they changes. We expect that people to not to change, but they change. So every suffering in our life is due to change or anicca. So the Buddha says, yada niccang tan dukkha. What is subjected to change is suffering. And the next part is yan dukkhang tadanatta. If something is suffering, that should not be considered as self, I or mine or myself, right? So the Buddha says, if something is subjected to suffering, it should not be considered as self or myself. So that is the way to understand the concept of not self. So these three signs of this existence, these three signatas of existence, which is called the anicca, the impermanence, and dukkha, suffering, and anatta, the not self, is the three signata. These are the three signs of this existence. And the whole point of practicing the Buddhist way of mindfulness is to understand these three signatas, the reality of life. So that is why the Buddha says, when you practice mindfulness, when you contemplate and when you focus your mind to this present moment, when it is arising, you know it. When it passes away, you know it. You are mindful of it. And that is the way to understand the true nature of our life. And the next part of this verse is so beautiful. It is so inspiring. The Buddha says, today the effort must be made. Tomorrow death may come. Who knows? No bargain with mortality. That is one beautiful word. No bargain with mortality. Understand that we all are mortal people. We all are subjected to death. and we all are dying. And there is no bargain with it. When that incident comes to our life, we have to get ready to go. So that when you understand this, the living moment, this present moment is so valuable for you to practice this Dharma, for you to practice this spirituality, right? Once you understand that you are subjected to death, you value the value of life. And in the next part, the Buddha says, can keep him and his hordes away, but one who dwells thus ardently, relentlessly, by day and night, it is he, the peaceful sage has said, who has had a single excellent night. Once you understand the true nature of the existence, and once you are not running back to the past, and once you learn how to not to expect the future, and once you learn how to be in this present moment and to understand the true nature of life, you can live an excellent night or an excellent day or an excellent life. So this is what Buddha meant from this beautiful poem. So the whole point of practicing the mindfulness in Buddhist practice is to understand the impermanence of life. So I think this little poem will help you to understand more about the Buddha's way of practicing mindfulness. So I have mentioned all the links and all the things that you need to read about this sutra and this poem in the descriptions below. So go check it out them, and also try to practice this mindfulness in your life. Try to add it to your daily life and enjoy a peaceful and a happier life. Namo Buddhaya.